Analysts and member countries agree that the composition of the Security Council is not representative or reflects the changing global reality. At the end of this month, the spokeswoman of the Presidency of the United Nations, Monica Grayley, referred to this, saying that the reform process should be the most inclusive and transparent possible. How is it to be achieved? Is it really among the priorities of the Charter? The researcher William Serafino, in an article for Mission Truth, stated, historian Paul Kennedy, in his work Rise and Fall of Great Powers, warns that the overweight of the United American Empire arrived to its peak, which marks a logical decline as the monarch of international relationship, comparing with the situation with the decline of the British Empire. Although comments that the specific of the United States waives its own singularity, it comes to the conclusion that its development and global control is unsustainable. Is this the medulla when we refer to the update of organization under all lights does not respond to the most important problems of global society, but that also watches as the United States maneuvers against Venezuela? Security Council, movements of balance and need for reform. This is what we're going to be analyzing today.
Hechos noticiosos, actores que están involucrados, sus intereses y contando como siempre con su compañía, si le parece. Vayamos.
The General Assembly of the United Nations chose St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Vietnam, Niger, Tunisia, Estonia as non-permanent members of the Security Council for the 2020-21 period. They will occupy their position from January 1st until December 31st of 2021. St. Vincent and the Grenadines, with 185 votes, obtained the position that belongs to the group of Latin America and the Caribbean. At the last moment, Salvador President did aspiration, but only got 6 votes. Until the end of this year, the seat will be occupied by Peru. After going to the second round, Estonia won the seat of the group of Eastern Europe with 132 votes. Romania, Georgia, and Latvia also unsuccessfully aspired for that feat. Vietnam from the Asia Pacific obtained 192 votes and will hold a seat in January for the next year, replacing Kuwait. Niger and Tunisia, both with 191 votes, won the place of Africa previously occupied by Coast of Ivory and Guinea Equatorial. Let's hear to the spokespeople of these countries.
St. Vincent
and the Grenadines deems this as a historical occasion. We are the smallest country to be chosen as a non-permanent member of the Security Council. We are firm on the fundamental principles of this organization, which came out of the Second World War, to achieve peace and security. Tunisia, a democratic nation which has achieved great advance in the last years in the construction of new democratic system. It will be the voice of human rights and also will be the voice of women who play an important role to the construction of peace. Our priority is that, as you know, I'm coming from a state of Sahel region. It's the fight against terrorism. Today is not the highest priority, obviously. What is this for? It calls to fight against the causes of terrorism that are mainly a result of underdevelopment. It is a long journey for our country. We recovered independence 30 years ago, and now we feel that we are ready to assume the responsibility to participate in these very hard and difficult debates because we have a multilateral system in the Security Council. The main organs of the United Nations are General Assembly, the Security Council, the Trusteeship Council, the Economic and Social Council, the International Court of Justice, and the Secretariat. All were created in 1945 when the organization was founded after the Second World War. Let's go to the structure and operation of the Security Council. Security Council of the United Nations. It has primary responsibility for the maintenance and international peace and security. It has 15 members. 5 members are permanent. They are the products of correlation forces in Second World War: Russia, United States, France, United Kingdom, and China. Only these have the right to veto. and 10 non-permanent that rotate for periods of 2 consecutive years. Every year, 5 positions are renovated. They are elected by at least 2/3 of the General Assembly. The seats are given by 3 for Africa, 2 for Latin America, 2 for Asia, 2 for Western Europe, 1 for Eastern Europe. Alternatively, a member must be from the Arab world, African or Asian. Today, the 10 non-permanent members are: for Africa, Ivory Coast, Equatorial Guinea, and South Africa; for Asia, Kuwait and Indonesia; for Latin America, the Caribbean, Peru and Dominican Republic; for the Western Europe, Belgium and Germany; for Eastern Europe, Poland. To difference of the other entities that only have power to make recommendation to governments, this is an organ with the ability to make decisions which are contained in binding resolutions. That is, compulsory compliance. Each member has a vote. According to Article 27 of the United Nations Charter, for a proposal to become a decision, it requires the affirmative vote of at least 9 members. If only one permanent member activates a veto, will be enough for the proposal not to be adopted. The Council can authorize the use of force to enforce a mandate. It may also impose embargoes and/or sanctions as pressure measures before using force. With regards to the presidency of the Council rotates monthly in alphabetical order in English of the names of the countries. This month it is Kuwait's 3rd time in history. The first time was in 1979 and the second one last year. The difference from the General Assembly, the Security Council meets all year round. Each member of the Security Council should have a representative available permanently at the UN headquarters in an event of an emergency meeting is necessary. Okay, now let's locate St. Vincent and the Grenadines, which will occupy from January 1st a seat among the 10 non-permanent for Latin America and Caribbean. It will be having the seat from January 1st. It's an island country in Latin America located north of Venezuela and the island of Grenada, in the chain of the Lesser Antilles of the Caribbean Sea. Its territory has 389 square kilometers, comprises the mainland of St. Vincent and 2/3 parts of the north of the archipelago of Grenadines. Its capital, its most important city, is Kingston Town, located on the island of St. Vincent. It is a member of CARICOM and ALBA TCP. It has a parliamentary democracy within the British national community.
Importante a la hora de ver la geopolítica regional. Democracia parlamentaria dentro de la Comunidad Británica de Naciones es además, San Vicente y las Granadinas.
Let's see what the Sputnik agency says.
Acá en la pantalla digital,
this is a publication from June 8th, 2019.
De Rusia, Sputnik, el día 8 de junio, es decir, hace 3, publicó Uruguay oficializa
3 days ago. Uruguay supports Brazil for a place in the Security Council. These are other 2 pieces that move. Uruguay announces the seat, and the General Assembly will vote in favor of Brazil when it's renovating seats for 2022-2023, according to the Chancellor reporting through a communication. The Foreign Affairs, Ernesto Araujo, thanked the intention of his counterpart Rodolfo Novoa. This is what we can read it. Both met on Friday in Brasilia due to an official visit of the Uruguayan minister, in which the situation of Mercosur was discussed. Brazil will occupy the pro tempore presidency from the upcoming July. They also spoke about common borders and implementation of agreements of permanent residency. Let's go to Xinhua. in Spanish on June 7th,
esta publicación
2019.
del 7 de junio, lo siguiente.
It says China supports improvement on the United Nations Security Council work methods. Said in an open debate of the Security Council, Hua Tao, permanent representative assistant of China to the UN, said that it's necessary to expand the authority and effectiveness so that it can better perform their duties provided by the Charter. And that is shared responsibility all of the time members of the Council. This requires that the Council concentrates on important matters of great urgency that threaten international peace and security, instead of intervening in any domestic matters that does not threaten international peace and security. We have observed an expansion of matters that cover various scenarios in the agenda of the Council in the last years, some of which even they have transcended the mandate of the Council, said the Chinese envoy, who added that the concerns expressed by the member states should be taken seriously by the Council. Let's see. Interpress Service News Agency. Great failure of the UN in protecting civilians in conflict by Taranga Yapoyague. It's a UN correspondent and political analyst. It says, to fight the UN security task to protect the civilians in armed conflicts, millions of people worldwide continue to be displaced and assassinated, with little or no responsibility for the aggressors. 20 years have passed since the Security Council committed to adopt measures for the protection of civilians in armed conflicts. The directory of the World Forum had only a single debate on the theme on May 23rd. There have been some advances. However, the global panorama continues to be serious as the civil population continues to be the most affected by the wars. According to the UN, Daisy Toussaint from Dominican Republic is going to analyze with us the role of the Security Council and to see the impact it has had. Let's not forget, this is the organ that can have compulsory effect. Hello, Daisy. Daisy, last Friday, June 7th, St. Vincent and the Grenadines was elected officially as the members of a non-permanent member of the Security Council of the United Nations. For 2020-2021, this country has become the smallest country up until now to be on the Security Council. With 185 votes in favor, it bet some other in their category. It's important to remember that the Security Council is made of 15 members. 5 are permanent, 10 are non-permanent. Franco Salve, the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, described the election of his state as historical. He said that the country is compromised with the principle of sustainable development, and as a small island country threatened by the flooding, he is very much worried for the climate change, and he compromises to defend peace and dialogue during his mandate. That this country be designated, it sort of gives a balance to the powers of other countries, corroborated that no matter how small a country may be, it has the same opportunities as other countries. Of these, he would be able to also approve a reform. As for possible reforms within the Council, Germany has showed interest in being a permanent member, arguing that possibly the UK leaving the European Union would leave Europe with only one member. And this is what Angela Merkel states. And this would leave them in unfair situation. On their side, other countries also ask to be permanent members with capacity of vote. India has showed a great growth. Brazil is strong in Latin America, Germany is economically strong, and Japan highly competitive. Those countries, due to the influence they have in their region, they are interested in having a permanent seat on the Security Council.
Y geoestratégicos, así como en la solución de conflictos internacionales. Pero para aumentar
However, to increase the number of permanent countries, the 5 members would have to agree, and they would have to modify the charter.
Gracias, Daisy.
Thank you, Daisy. See you next time. Okay, this is important to understand what importance for the geopolitical of the Caribbean does St. Vincent and the Grenadines seat have. This is what we'll see with our analysts on our next block. Security Council of the United Nations and the need for reform and the balance of powers. As we said before going to the pause, we are interested in trying to decipher how St. Vincent's and the Grenadines addition will change the outlook of the United Nations in the Security Council. Let's see more information and then we'll go to our analysts. St. Vincent and Grenadines, after going into the Security Council, is a support to the fight against global changes. St. Vincent and the Grenadines is a small country and is in risk of flood due to the rise of sea level, and that's why it's compromised to strongly work with the rest of the council members. It is a great support to develop sustainable development, but it also means a support to the Caribbean nations. The community of the Caribbean is in CARICOM celebrated this assignment. It is also an undeniable success of the Caribbean because there is Venezuela, and there have been many announcements of threatening against the stability of Venezuela. St. Vincent and the Grenadines has supported the sovereignty of Venezuela and rejected any type of interference in Venezuela. The Prime Minister has said that he supports the dialogues in Norway as a possible way out of the crisis in Venezuela. So it's not to be surprised the congratulation of the Venezuelan government. González expressed that they are compromised to the principles of equality of the people, non-interference, non-intervention, respect to sovereignty. Let's go to one of our guests from Switzerland. He's an independent expert of the United Nations. Thank you very much for being with us. And Francisco Coloane from Chile. He was 25 years an employee of United Nations. Let's start with Alfred. Alfred, is it far from being a democracy, the members of the United Nations Security Council? Do you think that St. Vincent and the Grenadines might be a
aún cuando
a
no
tip
sienten
in the
quienes tienen el
balance?
poder de veto. ¿Cómo lo ve usted,
How do you see it?
descifrando lo que significa para la geopolítica caribeña?
In fact, the new composition
Consejo de
of
Seguridad
the Security
será
Council
más favorable
will be
al
more
diálogo, más
favorable
favorable a
to
la
dialogue
mediación.
and mediation.
Considero que
I believe
cuando en el 1 de enero
that
del
on January
2020
1st of 2020,
comiencen los nuevos 5 miembros no
when the new
permanentes del
5
Consejo,
non-permanent
que
members
será
are in seat,
más
I think that it will be
probable llegar a
it will be
un
easier
acuerdo. En todo
to reach
caso,
agreements.
es bueno tener
In any case, it's
las
good to have
iniciativas de un
initiatives
pequeño
of a
país
small
como
country
San Vicente
like
y
St. Vincent's and the
y
Grenadines.
desde luego
And
el
of course, the
CARICOM,
CARICOM
y el CELAC
and
han sido
CELAC
organizaciones,
have been
que se han
organizations
pronunciado por la paz
that have
en
spoken in favor of the
Latinoamérica.
peace
Y
in Latin
considero
America.
que
And I consider
en vista de
that in that light
el desarrollo negativo
of the
del
negative
Grupo de
development
Lima,
of the Group
y
of
sobre
Lima
todo de Perú y,
and
de
overall
los
of
Estados Unidos
Peru
con
and the United
respecto
States in
a
regards to Venezuela,
es bueno
it's
que,
good, it's
entre
favorable
otro país
that a new country
representando
comes in
a el
representing
GRULAC. Sin embargo, hay que recordar
another
que
wing.
no
However, we
entran
must
en
remember
función hasta el 1 de
they
enero
start
del año que viene. Entre tanto,
in functions on
hay que usar
January
ese
1st.
tiempo
Meanwhile,
para
it's
tener
important to use this
estrategias
time
cómo mejor
to have strategies on how to best use these 2 years that St. Vincent's and the Grenadines will have, and how to boost not only in the Security Council, but in the General Assembly, a petition,
una resolución
a
que
resolution
le pida a la Corte Internacional
by which the court, the International Court, have a pronunciation on the illegality of the coercive and unilateral measures and sanctions against Venezuela. And what are the legal consequences of imposing sanctions, economic sanctions that kill people? Because this is something to bear in mind. In Washington, it was recently published by the Center of Economic Studies and Political Studies
Mark Weisbrot y el profesor Jeffrey Sachs
of Jeffrey Sachs of Columbia University of New York, a study that estimates that the sanctions are responsible for the death of no less than 40,000 Venezuelan people. Those people who need insulin or any type of medication, and they're not able to receive it due to the sanctions. Those who need medicines for the treatment of AIDS, and therefore we have a situation, a crime against humanity. And I think that a small country like St. Vincent and the Grenadines maybe could advance this idea of a consultative opinion of the International Justice Court in The Hague. The report of 2013 to the General Assembly on the reform of the United Nations and the reform of the Security Council, to which I made several recommendations for that reform. And I took the proposal of Kofi Annan, who in fact wanted to increase the members at the Security Council from 15 to 24, and who had also proposed that some states should have the faculty of veto. However, that is another topic. And now what's important is to use the upcoming 6 months in conversations with South Africa, with Germany, with Belgium, with other countries that are members of the Security Council, and they will continue to be so. And with the new members that are coming in, Vietnam, maybe Vietnam will want to support Tunisia, Niger.
De manera que estos 6 meses no
So
se
these
deben de
6 months
desperdiciar.
should not be thrown
Y yo
away.
espero
And I hope
que
that
la política
the
de
policy,
la presión, el chantaje, los
the policy of
ultimátumos,
pressure and ultimatums
sea condenado por una
be condemned
mayoría
by the majority
el Consejo de Seguridad
of the Security Council,
de la Asamblea
and
General.
of course by the majority of the United Nations Assembly.
Ha adoptado 27
As you know,
resoluciones
United Nations has adopted
condenando
27
el bloqueo
measures
de los Estados
condemning
Unidos
the
contra
U.S.
Cuba.
blockade against
Sin embargo,
Cuba.
no hay,
Nevertheless,
resoluciones
there
de la
are no
Asamblea
resolutions of the
que hayan
General Assembly
condenado
that
el
condemn
bloqueo financiero,
the
las
financial
sanciones,
blockade
las medidas, unilaterales de los
and all
Estados
of the
Unidos
other
contra
unilateral
Venezuela.
measures
Eso es necesario
against
que se
Venezuela.
impulse.
This is
Y como
important
ya
that be
dije,
boosted.
sería importante que
And as I said, it would be
CARICOM,
important that CARICOM
se tome este tema como una de
take
sus
this
prioridades.
topic into account and have it as one of their priorities. Thank you, Alfred. Let's go to our next guest. What, for you, what is the implication of the election of St. Vincent and the Grenadines for the region where Venezuela is located?
A petición, a solicitud o por las maniobras de Estados Unidos. A propósito, quiero preguntarle de una vez,
And I
me
would
llama la atención que
also ask that the United States has been,
si se quiere vaciar de legitimidad una organización que hace parte de su propio establishment con tal
has been trying to delegitimize the United Nations.
Le doy la palabra.
I would like to hear your opinion. Well, yes, United States, since the invasion on Iraq during the Bush administration, had a breaking point with the United Nations. And this was not completely healed with Obama's administration, because he had ambiguous policies on intervention with those countries that are not aligned with the U.S. interests. So, in the international policy of Barack Obama was a transition. It was very positive in some areas like Cuba, relatively negative in Egypt, and awful with Libya. Those are the hands that have been stained by blood. So going back to the center of your question, the United States respect or doesn't respect multilateralism. It's important what the Secretary General Guterres is doing now, because he wants to internally strengthen the mechanisms that will foster dialogue and make it more consistent and more political weight, to give it more weight to the Security Council. Well, with these 5 votes of the permanent members, they're all nuclear powers. So the idea of strengthening the organism of so the global panorama of using the tools of international policy that could be used to combat the blockade on Venezuela. So this particular election of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, beyond CARICOM, well, there was a bit of independence of Cuba, of not being aligned. United States pretends through pressure and intervention They tried to recover a hegemony that they've lost. And they're doing it unwell. Look what happened with Iran, and it's awful with Venezuela. Their strategy has proven not to be effective when throwing out Maduro. Even if you're not a government that's aligned, they should be respected. The foreign policy of the United States is very much dominated by geopolitical strength and influence of Israel. So for the United States, Venezuela is part of Iran, is part of Russia and China. And this is not so. The United States cannot keep on seeing the international world as they do. That's why Security Council doesn't totally agree with them too. Multilateralism is a principle by which they can tell the United States that they have limits on imposing their hegemony. And it's okay to have governments that are not aligned, and they must be respected. So now I think that there is a possibility that using this multilateral tool, the United States will fall back into place. And I'm worried about what might happen with the election of Boris Johnson in Great Britain, because it's different to have a Brexit, which would be a divided Europe. United Kingdom will feel much more autonomous for any adventure, and we don't know what might their foreign policy be. So there is a gray area there. Personally, it concerns me very much. So I think we should strengthen multilateralism so we can have a contention tool facing this disorder that we see in the world. So there are surprises, like my colleague said. We have to work with South Africa and with the other members to consolidate this position of multilateralism since the renovation of the Security Council. I'm going back to my other guest. Do you feel as positive as our previous guest? Do you think this is the most important thing? This is the most important topic in the Security Council and in the UN as a whole? In fact, as I told you, it's very hard when in the United States there is a president with three people of Abrams, Bolton, and Pompeo that give him the worst advices possible. So they're totally arrogant and unable to listen. Doesn't matter what he says in the United Nations or whatever he says to the general director, because they have this position of unilateral positions. And I think we have to wait for a next president of the U.S. because I don't think his position will change in the least bit. Just like my colleague said, even the policy of Mr. Obama, whom I highly appreciated, was awful in regards to Venezuela. It was good with Cuba, It was good with Iran, but it was and it still is awful in regards to Venezuela. Venezuela's great problem is that it's way too rich in petroleum, in gold, in bauxite, and other minerals. And this attracts the interest of great investors and obviously of great U.S. enterprises that want to take over all of this. So the geopolitics and geoeconomics control the situation far beyond the election of St. Vincent and the Grenadines to the Security Council. Alfredo and Francisco, thank you very much for sharing with us. Okay, let's see if we put it in light of balance and equality, the Security Council needs to be reformed. This would be the question. What would be necessary to do so? Or, on the other hand, maybe it's better if the United Nations disappears and just create a new organization. What would it mean to international relationships? And what about human rights? We'll talk this in our next phase.
Solo les deja ver quién es nuestra invitada.
We're back with critical moves. We're talking about Security Council in the UN and if there need to restructure because apparently it's unequal and unfair. Because in the permanent members, not all of the members that should be there are there. That's why they're striving for reform.
En su origen, Consejo de Seguridad
At the beginning, the United
5 de ellos permanentes.
The Security Council had 15 members, 5 of which were permanent. Then there was a restructure to widen this to 15, and they could carry out their responsibilities better. So from 5, it added to 15, and these 10 additional were not permanent. However, since the 90s, there's been talk of necessary reform. However, there has been no advance because no African or the Americans are in the group of the Permanent Council. In 2005, Brazil presented an initiative with the support of Germany, Japan, and India. There was supposed to be an increase from 15 to 20. However, the United States vetoed because they thought it was ineffective. China also rejected it because of their opposition with Japan. Germany is one of the countries who want to reform it because they want to be in the Permanent Council. They believe that they should expand and open up. Angela Merkel wants to reform so they can have all of the rights. The argument is that with the Brexit, the UK leaving, they would only be represented by one country. And they have the support of several European countries. Plus, they say that many of the members of the United Nations have seemed positive to reforming the Security Council. Let's continue with our analysis. Let's talk with Ana Cristina Bracho. She's a lawyer with a master's, and she's an international analyst. Thank you very much for being with us. When we're going into the UN website and we see Security Council, they say that it has the responsibility, as the Charter says, to maintain peace and world security.
tiene en este momento nuestra sociedad, y te pregunto a ti, Ana Cristina,
And I'm asking you
¿qué tarea esta organización?
if they've been able to do this task. Well, we have to understand that the Security Charter was born after the agreements after World War II of the Allied countries. In this sense, the Security Council has allowed this order that was established after the World War to maintain itself. The security and peace is not the same as human rights for United Nations because they have different instances to treat them. The questionings about this organism are historical. Ever since it was born, the Latin American countries believe it's unfair that we have no member on the Security Council. Later, we're aware that in the 60s, it's increased to 15 members. Now we see some winds of change because for the first time, a small country like St. Vincent and the Grenadines is in this space. However, the logic of power is still the same. We still keep having 5 permanent members with veto power, and the 10 others don't. And they're able to take measures in rejection of the General Assembly. So they have been able to carry out some peace projects, and their success are related to the intervention in countries like in South Africa with the elimination of apartheid. But they have not been able to fulfill a time of peace. And ever since Afghanistan and Iraq, it's even more questioned because the Security Council would be the only entity to sanction another government. And now we see that unilateral measures are still happening. However, the Security Council cannot do anything. And it's a space that cannot only use force, but if so necessary, like they've done historically, they can also sanction or put restrictive sanctions. We were asking our 2 previous guests something that leads us to think in this question. If what the U.S. has done, what do you think they're trying to bend? Are they trying to bend the purpose? Because they don't even respect the institution of the United Nations. Yes, we have to see that there are several chapters. There have been times when the U.S. loses force or wins the support. And they're back to the United Nations when they feel that they can control this entity. But the U.S. is faced with the need of reforming the international law. We see it when they do it against the liberty of commerce against some countries. We see it with coercive unilateral force against other countries. So we have to see that the Security Council is not democratic and that they're unable to solve social problems. A key example of this are the missions that have been sent to Haiti and what's happened to the Central African governments, that those armies that are sent there, they're always questioned because they too violate the human rights. So United Nations are in a very delicate place. Let's remember that United Nations, the Security Council, has 15 members, of which 10 are not permanent, that are renovated. And now United States wanted Salvador come in to the Security Council. But 185 countries gave the chance to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and what they're saying is that they want dialogue and non-intervention. So this is a very hard place for the U.S. Ana Cristina, let's see what Hugo Chavez, in a historical speech that he gave in the year 2006 in the United Nations, where he said that it smells like sulfur. But they have made this group to just deliberative. It has no power to impact in any way the reality. That's why we propose once again on this September 20 to restructure United Nations. And last year we presented 4 reform proposals that we consider that are urgent. Well, maybe the chiefs of states, our ambassadors, our presidents, we must discuss them first. The expansion of the Security Council in their permanent and non-permanent categories, opening the door to new countries, both big and small. So first, the expansion of the Security Council and its permanent and non-permanent categories, opening the doors to new countries, both developed and still not developed, as new permanent members. That in first place. In second place, the application of effective mechanisms to solve disputes. Third, we think it must be suppressed immediately of that anti-democratic mechanism of the veto. The veto in the Security Council decisions. These are words that are still up to date. I would like to hear your opinion on these words. And let's talk about the operations that the U.S. has carried out. And this also gives us a picture of the clash of the international powers. Of course, first of all, we have to see how bad the Security Council is working and how bad their appearance is. And they're even dealing topics of internal management of countries, and which is not in their prerogative. So when there are powers that think that they only have one-sided visions. There were 2 sessions last year. The January did not go for, because we needed some majority to submit proposals to the Security Council. And in February we tried again, where we did have the majority. There were 2 propositions of China and Russia that so we see how the Security Council is showing us that there is a need to have more and wider representation of our countries. So we have this debate, and we have to see it in perspective of a new world. We're not in the same line as Germany. We want the voices of all of the small countries and incapable of producing alone something that the old allies can. So here we see the Security Council that must show that United Nations can stop an aggression. However, they don't do so because United States goes beyond the margins. And we also have this fundamental thing that there's a small group of countries who decide if there should be peace or war. And they totally break all laws. Ana Cristina, do you think that it's possible to democratize? We think we have a good sign there, because small countries like St. Vincent and the Grenadines might be a hope. The real possibilities depend, because there are some who say that Venezuela could never reach the Security Council. So everything depends on the political climate and the will of the countries, but also of the factors of reality, of how strong the powers are and where they have their interest focused. Thank you very much for sharing with us your points of view. Let's go to our conclusions. Well, questions, very old questions. They're legitimate, and they all speak of the redistribution of the United Nations and fundamentally of the Security Council. If there are transparent mechanisms to reform, why? Because they are unable to solve problems of society. And the Security Council is also getting into aspects of internal affairs of each country. Now with St. Vincent and the Grenadines, there is this hope that there might be a light of hope to go to dialogues and negotiation. However, it is possible that some resolutions, the resolutions of the Security Council on the U.S. may be blocked, and this will prove that they don't have hegemony inside the Council. Here we see hopeful positions and others not so hopeful. We'll keep on analyzing this. Thank you for being with us.